I was still hooked to machines when the nurse leaned over and whispered, "Ma'am, your sister's saying you passed." The words floated through the morphine haze like a bad joke. My throat was too dry to speak, tubes running down it like highways of plastic. But my eyes must have shown confusion because she pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me. There was my sister Patricia, standing at the pulpit of First Baptist Church, the one we'd attended since we were kids. Tears streamed down her face like she'd practiced them in the mirror. Her voice cracked at all the right moments as she told the congregation about losing her beloved sister. About how sudden it was. About how the medical bills and funeral costs were overwhelming the family. I watched her dab her eyes with a tissue, the same way she used to when she wanted Dad to buy her something expensive. The congregation was eating it up. Hands reached for wallets. The collection basket started making rounds. I tried to sit up, but the machines screamed their protests. The nurse gently pushed me back down. "There's more," she said quietly. I motioned for her to replay it because I had to be sure I wasn't dreaming. This was my younger sister, the one I'd protected my whole life. The nurse scrolled down my sister's Facebook page while I stared at the screen through blurry eyes. There it was, posted 3 days ago while I was still in surgery. A black ribbon photo with my face in the center. "Rest in peace, beloved Sister Helen. 1982 to 2024. Heaven gained an angel today." The comment section was a waterfall of condolences. People from high school I hadn't seen in years were writing about what a good woman I'd been. Neighbors offered to bring casseroles. Church members quoted scripture about eternal rest. My best friend Margaret from the library wrote that she'd miss our Saturday book club meetings. Each comment felt like reading my own ghost story. Some people shared memories of me that I didn't even remember clearly. Others promised prayers for my soul. But the ones that made my blood pressure spike, making the monitors beep frantically, were the ones offering money. "Patricia, please let us help with expenses. What's your Venmo? We want to contribute. The least we can do is help with the funeral costs." The nurse had to adjust my oxygen because I was breathing too hard. Then I saw the words that changed everything. Patricia had replied to each offer with the same message: "Funeral expenses appreciated. Message me for details." My own sister had monetized my supposed death. One click opened a donation link Patricia had set up on GoFundMe. "Help us say goodbye to Helen," blazed across the top in elegant script. The goal was set at $15,000. She'd already raised $8,347 in just 3 days. The description made me sound like a saint I'd never been. Helen touched so many lives in our community. As her only living relative, I want to give her the send-off she deserves. Every penny will go toward medical bills, funeral services, and a proper headstone. The donor's name scrolled down like credits in a movie about my fake death. Mrs. Henderson from down the street. $200. The Johnsons who owned the corner store. $500. Even my ex-husband Thomas had chipped in $50 with a note saying, "For old time's sake, despite everything." Some people I didn't recognize at all. Probably friends of Patricia's who'd never even met me. They were paying for a funeral that would never happen, for a corpse that was still breathing, for grief that Patricia was manufacturing like she was running a factory. My sister had turned my near death into a business opportunity. The nurse must have seen something in my face because she pulled the phone back gently. "Ma'am, should I call someone?" "The police." I shook my head slowly. I couldn't speak yet, but I knew exactly what I was going to do. I asked the nurse to email me everything before she closed the page. That night, while monitors beeped my vital signs into the darkness, the nurse came back with another video. "I thought you should see this one too," she whispered, glancing at the door like she was smuggling contraband. This time, Patricia stood outside the church, shaking hands with a line of people waiting to offer condolences. Each one pressed cash or checks into her palm. She hugged them, her shoulders shaking with what looked like grief but what I knew was probably excitement about the money. "Thank you so much for supporting the family through this difficult time," she said to each person with that perfect tremor in her voice. Not too much emotion, just enough to sound broken and vulnerable. An elderly man I recognized as Mr. Williams, who'd taught me woodshop in high school, handed her what looked like several $100 bills. "Helen was a good woman," he said with tears in his eyes. "This is the least I can do for her memory." Patricia clutched the money to her chest like it was a love letter from a long-lost romance. "She would have been so touched by your generosity," she said, her voice breaking perfectly. The irony wasn't lost on me. I would have been touched by rage burning through my veins. She moved through that crowd like a professional mourner, collecting tribute for the dead woman who was watching her performance from a hospital bed 12 miles away. I hit replay 3 times, memorizing every word, every gesture, every face, because soon, everyone else would see this too. When Dr. Morrison finally signed my discharge papers 2 weeks later, I didn't rush to Patricia's house or call the cops like everyone expected. The nurses kept asking if someone was picking me up, probably wondering why my grieving sister wasn't there to take me home. I just smiled weakly and called a cab. Rage wanted to drive, wanted me to storm into her living room and expose her right then and there, but I put that rage in the trunk and locked it tight for later. I had something else in mind, something that required patience and planning. The cab driver, a kind woman in her 50s, helped me with my walker, probably thinking I was some lonely woman with no family left. If only she knew my family thought I was already in the ground rotting. My house smelled stale when I opened the door. 2 weeks of emptiness clinging to everything like dust. Mail piled up by the door, including several sympathy cards addressed to Patricia care of my address. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I settled into my recliner, the one Patricia always said I should replace because it embarrassed her when her friends came over for coffee. Well, her friends thought I was dead now, so the chair's reputation was safe from judgment. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Not a list of grievances to scream about, but a list of evidence to collect. I wanted something quieter than confrontation, something more final than a simple accusation. And that meant proof. All of it, documented and undeniable. Back home, weak but breathing, I turned my dining room into a war room for justice. My laptop sat open like a command center on the oak table I'd inherited from our mother. File folders spread across the surface, each one labeled with military precision. Facebook posts, donation records, church videos, GoFundMe screenshots. I worked slowly, my body still recovering from surgery, but my mind was sharp as a blade that had been waiting years to be sharpened. Every post Patricia made got screenshot and printed in color. Every comment expressing condolences got documented with timestamps. Every donation amount got logged in a detailed spreadsheet with names, dates, and amounts. She'd been thorough in her deception, posting daily updates about her grief journey, like it was a serialized novel. One post showed her at my supposed gravesite, probably some random cemetery plot she'd found, placing flowers with dramatic flair. "Missing you every day, dear sister," the caption read with 3 broken heart emojis. 300 reactions. 52 comments of support. I found her GoFundMe updates too, each one more manipulative than the last. "Thank you all for the overwhelming support. Helen would be so humbled by your generosity." The total had climbed to $11,000 in 2 weeks. She'd added photos of funeral programs she'd had printed at the local print shop. My face stared back at me from glossy paper that announced my memorial service scheduled for next month. A service I'd missed on account of being alive and recovering. Then a notification popped up on my screen that made my hands stop typing. A Facebook message from someone I didn't recognize personally. I told him to send proof of his donation immediately. Within minutes, my inbox filled with a bank transfer receipt, dated a week ago, $500 to Patricia's personal account with Helen's funeral in the memo line. His name was Malcolm, and he was a friend of Patricia's son from college days. He wasn't the only one who'd started asking questions about the dead woman walking. Another message came from a woman named Shelley who lived 2 streets over. I gave your sister my rent money because she said you had no life insurance and she couldn't afford to bury you properly. But my neighbor swears she saw you walking around your backyard this morning watering plants. I didn't have much of a garden, but I had been outside, slowly with my walker, trying to rebuild my strength in the fresh air. People were starting to notice the dead woman walking around town doing very alive things. Each person who messaged got the same reply from me. Please send documentation of any donations you made. This is very important for legal purposes. By the end of the day, I had 17 different people who'd given money for my funeral expenses. The total was staggering. Almost $14,000 from people who thought they were helping lay me to rest in peace. Some gave from their modest savings. Others borrowed money to help with what they thought was an emergency. One elderly woman named Betty admitted she'd used part of her Social Security check because Helen was always so kind to me at the library. These weren't rich people with money to spare. They were folks who believed in helping neighbors in genuine need. And I realized this wasn't just betrayal or greed or sibling rivalry. This was theft in my name, using my supposed death as a weapon to rob good people of their hard-earned money. While I gathered evidence like a prosecutor building a case for trial, Patricia posted something that made me actually smile for the first time in weeks. A bright, glittering invitation on Facebook, 40 and shining, Patricia's birthday celebration. The graphic sparkled with golden borders and professional photography that must have cost a fortune. She'd rented the grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel, the fanciest venue in our town. Join us for an elegant evening celebrating 4 decades of life, love, and friendship, the description read in flowing script. Formal attire requested. RSVP required for catering purposes. The date was circled in gold. March 15th. 3 months away from now. She'd been planning this for half a year, she told people in the comments, wanting to make her 40th birthday the social event of the season. The comment section exploded with excitement from her friends. People promised to be there, to bring gifts, to celebrate her milestone birthday. She responded to each one with heart emojis and effusive thanks. The same people who donated to my funeral were now planning to attend her extravagant party. Some mentioned how brave she was to celebrate after losing her sister so recently. Others admired her strength in moving forward with life despite her grief. She replied that I would have wanted her to celebrate, that I wouldn't want her to stop living just because I was gone. The audacity was breathtaking and almost impressive. She wanted a stage for her performance? Fine. She'd get one. And I'd make sure it was absolutely unforgettable for everyone involved. I circled March 15th on my calendar with a red marker, then sat back and did the math carefully. 3 months. 12 weeks. 90 days to prepare something special for my sister's special day. She wanted the whole town to celebrate her life while she'd been profiting from my supposed death for weeks. The irony was delicious enough to savor. I created a new folder on my laptop labeled Birthday Surprise, and started planning with the same attention to detail Patricia had used in her fraud. First, I needed to recover fully from surgery. My body was still weak and tired easily, but physical therapy was helping more each day. The therapist kept saying how motivated I seemed, how determined to regain my strength. If only she knew what was driving me forward. Second, I needed to compile everything into a presentation that couldn't be disputed or dismissed as misunderstanding. Not just screenshots that could be called fake, but videos, bank records, documentation that would stand up in court if it came to that. Third, I needed to stay hidden enough that Patricia wouldn't know I was alive and active, but visible enough that when I revealed myself, people would recognize me immediately without doubt. It was a delicate balance to maintain. I started growing my hair out differently, wearing different clothes than my usual style, shopping at different stores at different times than my normal routine. When people I knew saw me in passing, I'd wave but keep moving, like a ghost who didn't have time to chat about the afterlife. Some looked confused, probably wondering if they were seeing things or if grief was playing tricks on their minds. 2 weeks before Patricia's grand celebration, I had my first package delivered to her house. A beautiful bouquet of white lilies, traditional funeral flowers, with a small card tucked between the stems. The florist had been confused when I dictated the message over the phone, but I'd paid cash and tipped well enough that she didn't ask uncomfortable questions. The card read in elegant script, "From your dearly departed sister." I watched from my car parked down the street as the delivery van pulled up to Patricia's house around noon. She answered the door in her bathrobe, probably expecting an early birthday gift from one of her many admirers. Her face went from delight to confusion to something like fear as she read the card attached to the flowers. She looked up and down the street nervously, searching for something, someone, an explanation. Then she quickly pulled the flowers inside and slammed the door hard enough that I heard it from my car. She didn't post that delivery on Facebook. No photo of the beautiful bouquet with thanks to her secret admirer. No mention of the mysterious flowers at all. But I knew she'd gotten them. And I knew she was wondering and worrying. Was it a prank? A mistake at the florist? Or was her dead sister trying to tell her something from beyond the grave? I drove home slowly, humming a tune I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was something from a funeral hymn we'd sung as children. My cousin Beth texted me that evening. "Patricia looked pale at the grocery store today. Asked if I'd heard from you recently." Weird question, right? Perfect. The seeds of doubt were sprouting. 3 days later, Patricia received another delivery that would keep her up at night. This time, it was a sympathy card, the expensive kind from the Hallmark store with embossed letters and a satin ribbon. The kind people send when someone dies and they want to show they care. Inside, I'd written simply in my own handwriting, "With deepest condolences on your loss, Helen." The beauty of it was that it could mean anything she wanted it to mean. Condolences on losing me? On losing her scheme? On what was about to happen at her party? I'd paid a neighborhood teenager $20 to put it directly in her mailbox while she was at work during the day. By the time she got home, it would be waiting for her like a paper ghost. That evening, my phone started buzzing with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Patricia was reaching out to everyone in the family, asking if they'd heard from me, if I was okay, if I was back somehow. I let them all go to voicemail without answering. Then I sent a group text to the family. "Feeling better every day. Thanks for checking on me. Looking forward to spring." Nothing more, nothing less. Just enough to confirm I was alive without explaining anything about what had happened. The simplicity of it was perfect and maddening for her. Patricia couldn't come out and say, "But I told everyone she was dead," without admitting her massive lie to the family. So she had to dance around it, asking vague questions that made her sound unhinged and paranoid. "She's been through so much with her health," she told our cousin nervously. "I just want to make sure she's really okay and stable." Soon, she'd find out exactly how okay and stable I really was. The final pre-party surprise came in the mail 5 days before her birthday celebration. I'd taken her own invitation, the one she'd posted online for everyone to see, printed it out on expensive cardstock, and made one small but significant addition. At the bottom, in bold red letters, I'd written, "Special guest appearance. Don't miss it." Then I'd mailed it back to her in a plain envelope with no return address. I imagined her opening it, seeing her own party invitation transformed into something ominous and threatening. She started calling family members frantically that same evening. My phone had 15 missed calls from various relatives by noon the next day. "Patricia's asking if you're planning something," Cousin Marie texted me. "She seems really worried about you crashing her party or something." I responded to everyone with the same calm message. "I'm feeling better every day. Looking forward to celebrating life." Let them interpret that however they wanted. Patricia was now caught in a trap of her own making that was closing around her. She couldn't uninvite me without explaining why her dead sister might show up. She couldn't cancel the party without losing the deposits and disappointing everyone who'd RSVP'd. She couldn't even warn people without admitting to the lie that was starting to unfold. So she did what she always did when cornered by consequences. She pretended everything was fine and under control. Her Facebook posts about the party continued, bright and cheerful. but I noticed she'd stopped mentioning anything about family attending the celebration. She was nervous and it showed. Good. Because nervous people make mistakes in public, and I was counting on her to make several big ones in front of everyone. The night before Patricia's party, I laid everything out on my dining room table like evidence at a criminal trial. 3 months of collected proof arranged in perfect chronological order that told an undeniable story. The Facebook obituary post with timestamp visible. The GoFundMe page showing $14,462 raised from innocent people. Screenshots of her replies to donors with her Venmo information. Bank records from 17 different people who'd sent money in good faith. The church video of her tearful eulogy while I was in surgery fighting for my life. Photos of the funeral program she did printed with my photo and fake death date. Her daily grief posts, each one more dramatic than the last, like episodes of a sad television show. I practiced my speech in front of the bathroom mirror, keeping my voice calm and steady and factual. No yelling. No drama. No emotional breakdown. Just facts, presented in chronological order, with evidence to back up every single word. Before we celebrate, I practiced to my reflection. I think the guest of honor forgot to thank some very generous people. I wouldn't accuse directly. I just present the evidence and let it speak for itself. Let the donors recognize their own names on the screen. Let the pastor see himself handing her the microphone. Let everyone draw their own conclusions about what kind of person does this. I loaded everything onto a USB drive, then made 3 backup copies just to be safe. One for my pocket, one for my car, one hidden in my jacket lining. Patricia had taught me to always be prepared when we were kids, back when she was still the sister I thought I knew and trusted. Tomorrow, that childhood lesson would come back to haunt her in ways she never imagined. And the first slide? Her own obituary post about me, posted while I was still breathing through machines in the ICU. Patricia's 40th birthday party dripped gold from every surface like a gilded cage. Golden balloons clustered in the corners like champagne bubbles frozen in time. Towers of real champagne glasses caught the light from 3 massive crystal chandeliers. A banner stretched across the stage. Patricia, 40 years of grace. She'd spared no expense on this celebration, probably using some of my funeral money to pay for the venue and decorations. I stood outside the grand ballroom for a moment, watching through the glass doors like a ghost observing the living. Patricia floated between guests in a sequined gold dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent payment. She hugged everyone, laughed at their jokes, posed for photos with different groups. The perfect hostess, the grieving sister who'd found strength to celebrate life despite her tragic loss. The crowd was bigger than I'd expected when I'd planned this. At least 100 people, maybe more, filling the elegant space. I recognized most of them. Church members, neighbors, her book club friends, her co-workers from the insurance company. The same people who'd donated to my funeral fund. The same people who'd offered condolences on my death. The ones who'd believed her tears were real and her grief was genuine. I adjusted my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for my cousin's wedding that never happened. In my hand, I carried a simple leather folder. Nothing dramatic or attention-grabbing. Nothing that would draw eyes until I wanted all eyes on me. I took a deep breath, tasting the moment like expensive wine I'd been saving. Then I walked in through those doors. Alive. Breathing. Folder under my arm. Ready to give my sister the birthday gift she'd never, ever forget for the rest of her life. Conversations died mid-sentence like someone had pulled the plug on the entire room's power. A champagne glass hit the marble floor and shattered, the sound echoing in the sudden silence that fell like a heavy blanket. Heads turned toward me in slow motion, eyes widening with recognition, confusion, disbelief, fear. Patricia stood frozen by the chocolate fountain, her smile still plastered on her face but her eyes showing pure terror. I didn't stop walking or hesitate for a second. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor as I made my way through the crowd with purpose. People parted like the Red Sea, some reaching out like they wanted to touch me to make sure I was real and not a ghost. Helen? someone whispered in shock. But I thought, didn't she? I kept walking until I reached the microphone on the small stage they'd set up for birthday speeches and toasts. The DJ, a young man who probably had no idea what was happening, actually handed it to me without question. The microphone felt solid in my hand, real and heavy, unlike the ghost everyone in this room thought I was supposed to be. I turned to face the crowd, taking in their shocked faces, their confusion, their growing realization that something was very, very wrong with this picture. Patricia hadn't moved from her spot. She stood there like a golden statue, champagne glass still raised halfway to her lips in frozen celebration. "Before we celebrate my sister's milestone birthday," I said, my voice carrying clear and strong through the speakers, "a few thank yous are in order for some very generous people in this room." On the projector screen behind me, the first slide appeared large and undeniable. Patricia's obituary post filled the wall, 10 feet tall and impossible to miss or deny. "Rest in peace, beloved Sister Helen. 1982 to 2024. Heaven gained an angel today." The timestamp showed February 2nd, while I was in surgery having my life saved. The comment section was visible, showing the outpouring of condolences, the offers of help, the promises of donations from good-hearted people. Gasps spread through the ballroom like wildfire jumping from tree to tree. People pulled out their phones, probably checking their own Facebook feeds to see if they'd commented on that post about my death. Some were finding their own words of sympathy staring back at them from weeks ago. "This was posted while I was in the ICU, I said calmly into the microphone. "Still very much alive, as you can clearly see standing here before you." An elderly woman in the front row sat down hard in her chair, hand over her mouth. A man I recognized from Patricia's work looked between the screen and Patricia with his mouth hanging open in shock. "But wait," I continued, clicking to the next slide with my remote control. "There's more evidence to share." The GoFundMe page appeared next, filling the screen. "Help us say goodbye to Helen." Goal: $15,000. Amount raised: $14,462 from generous donors. The donor list scrolled slowly down the side of the screen. "Every penny for medical bills, funeral services, and a proper headstone," I read from Patricia's description. Strange, since I never had a funeral. Or a headstone with my name on it. And my insurance covered the medical bills completely. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. People were looking at each other, at Patricia, at me, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And then came the donation page, listing every single name and amount that people had given in good faith. Names and amounts filled the screen like a receipt from hell that kept getting longer. Malcolm Johnson, $500. The young man stood up in the back, his face red with anger. Shelley Washington, $200. I saw her in the corner, hand over her mouth in shock. Mr. and Mrs. Watson, $500. The couple who owned the corner store looked at each other in horror and betrayal. The list kept scrolling down the screen slowly. Each name was someone in this room or someone they knew personally. Each amount was money given in good faith for a funeral that never happened, for a dead woman who was standing right in front of them. People started recognizing their own donations, their own names on what was essentially a list of victims of fraud. "That's my rent money," Shelley said, loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear. "I gave my rent money for her funeral because Patricia said there was no insurance." $500, Malcolm said, his voice shaking with rage. "I gave $500 I couldn't afford because she said she couldn't afford to bury her own sister properly." The mood in the room shifted from confusion to anger like a storm rolling in. People were standing up, pointing at the screen, recognizing their names, their money, their trust betrayed. Patricia finally found her voice somewhere. "This is a terrible misunderstanding," she started weakly, but nobody was listening to her excuses. They were all staring at the screen, watching their donations scroll by like credits in a movie about deception and greed. "And now," I said, clicking to the next slide with deliberate slowness, "let me show you the video evidence of how this worked." Patricia appeared on the screen, standing at the pulpit of First Baptist Church looking devastated. The date stamp showed February 4th, 2 days after my supposed death. She was crying, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, her voice breaking as she spoke about losing me to the congregation. Helen was more than a sister, her recorded voice said with perfect emotion. She was my best friend, my protector, my only family left in this world. She talked about my kindness, my generosity, and my faith in God. The congregation in the video was visibly moved by her performance. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for without knowing it. The medical bills are overwhelming, video Patricia said with a trembling voice. And without life insurance, I don't know how I'll afford to give her the send-off she deserves. The collection baskets started moving through the pews in the video. The camera caught people pulling out wallets, writing checks, dropping cash into the basket. The same Patricia now stood trembling by the cake table, her golden dress looking more like a costume than celebration wear. "That's me," the pastor said from his table, standing up slowly. "That's me handing her the microphone in my church. Dear God, what have we done? What has she done?" More videos played in succession. Patricia at different churches, different congregations, same tearful performance. Each time, the tears came right on cue like she'd rehearsed them. Each time, the donation baskets filled with money from generous people. Each time, she thanked people for their generosity while I lay in a hospital bed across town, fighting to breathe and survive. A man in the audience suddenly shouted, "That's my $500 from my savings. I want my $500 back right now." I pulled out my hospital discharge papers and held them up for everyone to see, then put them on the document camera so they appeared on the screen for all. Admitted, February 1st. Discharged, February 16th. The dates lined up perfectly with Patricia's fundraising campaign across multiple churches. Every speech she gave, every tear she cried, every dollar she collected, all while I was documented as a living patient in the hospital system. "These are my official medical records," I said calmly. "Proof that I was alive through every eulogy, every memorial post, every donation she accepted in my name from good people." The pastor stood up slowly, his face pale and angry. "Patricia," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his moral authority. "Is this true? Did you tell us Helen was dead while she was still in the hospital recovering?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air on dry land. She looked around the room desperately for support, for anyone who might take her side, but found only accusatory stares and angry faces. "Do we need to call the police?" the pastor asked, pulling out his phone. "This is fraud. This is theft from the church and the community." "It's worse than that," said Mrs. Henderson, who donated $200 from her fixed income. "It's blasphemy. She stood in God's house and lied to all of us." The crowd was turning ugly with righteous anger. People were standing, moving toward Patricia, not threatening but demanding answers. Demanding their money back. Demanding justice for the deception. Patricia grabbed the microphone from the DJ stand with shaking hands, her fingers barely able to hold it steady. "Please everyone, let me explain this misunderstanding," Patricia stammered into the microphone, but her voice was drowned out by the crowd's rising anger. "Explain what exactly?" someone shouted from the back. "How you stole from us? How you lied in church to our faces?" Another voice called out angrily. "How you buried your sister while she was still breathing in a hospital bed?" Patricia tried again desperately. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I thought. The doctors said. I was told she wouldn't make it through the night. Then why didn't you tell people when she survived?" Carol demanded, standing up. "Why did you keep taking money for weeks? Why is the GoFundMe still active right now?" Malcolm added, holding up his phone to show everyone. "It's still accepting donations as we speak." The questions came faster than Patricia could deflect them with weak excuses. Her perfect party was becoming an interrogation. The golden balloons seemed to mock her, the champagne towers stood untouched, and her elaborate birthday cake sat forgotten while the crowd demanded answers she couldn't give without admitting guilt. "I want receipts," Mr. Johnson said firmly. "I want to see where our money went. Funeral home receipts, hospital bills paid, something to prove you used it for what you said." Patricia's face went from red to white in seconds. There were no receipts because there were no legitimate expenses. Just pure profit from a calculated lie. "Anyone who donated money," I said calmly into my microphone, cutting through the chaos, "see the venue manager for copies of all documentation I've prepared. Get your money back from the person who asked for it under false pretenses." I simply closed my folder and set it down on the gift table. I set the folder down on the gift table, right next to the pile of expensive birthday presents Patricia would never get to open. "Everything you need is in here," I announced to the crowd. "Screenshots, bank records, dates, times, amounts. Make copies. Take pictures. Do whatever you need to do to get your money back from my sister." I looked directly at Patricia for the first time since entering the ballroom. Her sequin dress caught the light, making her look like a disco ball at a funeral. "Happy birthday, Patricia," I said into the microphone. "I hope it's memorable, because people will be talking about this for years." Then I started walking toward the exit with my head held high. Behind me, chaos erupted like a volcano. People rushed toward the folder, toward Patricia, toward the truth that had been hidden under funeral flowers and fake tears. "Wait!" Patricia screamed desperately. "Helen, please. Let me explain. It's not what it looks like." But I didn't stop walking. I didn't turn around. I'd said everything that needed saying. "You can't just leave," she yelled, her voice breaking. "You're my sister. Family doesn't do this to family." That made me pause at the door, my hand on the handle. I looked back one final time at the golden celebration turned into a crime scene. "I was your sister," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. "Then you killed me for money and sympathy. Consider this my resurrection from your lies." The last thing I saw before the door closed was Patricia standing alone in the middle of her ruined party, golden dress glittering, as everyone she deceived closed in demanding their money back and answers. Then I walked out into the fresh air before the birthday cake knife ever touched icing. I was done being dead. Behind me, I heard the party die like someone had pulled life support from it. The music cut off mid-song abruptly. Chairs scraped against the floor harshly. Voices rose in anger, in disbelief, in demands for justice and restitution. The grand double doors slammed open and shut as people stormed out in groups. Through the glass, I could see some heading straight for their cars, phones pressed to their ears, probably calling lawyers or family members or maybe even the police to report fraud. Others stayed inside, surrounding Patricia like antibodies attacking an infection in the body. Her golden birthday had turned into a reckoning she'd never escape. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car in the parking lot. Messages flooded in from people who'd been at the party, from those who'd heard about it, from donors who wanted their money back immediately. Screenshots of Patricia's meltdown were already hitting Facebook and spreading. Someone had live-streamed part of my presentation to social media. The truth was spreading faster than her lies ever had, like wildfire through dry grass. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the hotel windows as the golden balloons began to deflate slowly, as the champagne towers stood abandoned, as the birthday banner got torn down by angry staff. The grand ballroom, which Patricia had rented to celebrate her life, had become the scene of her social death and public shame. Her party collapsed under the weight of receipts and rage from betrayed donors. And my phone kept buzzing with more proof pouring in from people I hadn't even known about, from churches I hadn't visited, from fundraisers I hadn't discovered in my investigation. The scope of her deception was even bigger than I'd imagined. Over the next few days, Patricia's fraud unfolded like a cheap necklace. One tug and the whole thing scattered across the floor. Screenshots, receipts, videos, and voice notes poured into my inbox faster than I could open them. She hadn't stopped at our county. She'd driven to neighboring cities, spun the same lie about her dead sister, and milked donations from churches, women's fellowships, and even small-town schools hosting bake sales in my honor. Everywhere, she'd weaponized my silence. My survival had become her golden goose. By Thursday, a local paper called it the resurrection scam. By Friday, Patricia's face was plastered on every major news site. A still frame of her screaming during her birthday collapse. Someone had slowed down the footage, zoomed in on her shaking mascara-streaked face, and posted it under the caption, "Golden Girl Exposed." It went viral. I thought she might disappear. Instead, Patricia doubled down. She posted a shaky video on a burner account, claiming she was the real victim, that I was obsessed with destroying her. But the comment section didn't side with her. The receipts were too loud. One woman wrote, "You collected $5,000 from my church by crying about your dead sister. She's sitting here alive, telling her own story. You're done." The courts moved quickly this time. Fraud investigations don't move at the speed of justice. They move at the speed of outrage. Within a week, Patricia was served. The charges stacked higher than her champagne tower had at the party. Fraud, wire fraud, obtaining funds under false pretenses. But in the quiet moments, between meetings with lawyers, reporters, and police investigators, I caught myself staring at the ceiling of my small apartment, wondering, how did we get here? How did my silence become her empire? And more importantly, what was I going to build now that it was finally gone? The courtroom was fuller this time, packed with people who had once called Patricia friend or family. Now they sat on the other side, eyes hard, waiting for restitution. Patricia shuffled in wearing county orange, her once polished hair limp and greasy. She wouldn't look at me. The prosecutor didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke for itself: forged donation ledgers, text messages begging for urgent help, live streams where she squeezed fake tears for cash. And then the kicker, the recorded clip of her bragging to a friend that people love a good sob story, especially when it comes with receipts of a funeral. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt with hands that no longer shook. "I am not the ghost my sister tried to sell," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the courtroom. "I am the woman who survived. And I am done living in her shadow. This story ends here." Patricia got 5 years. Not probation, not community service, real prison time. A ripple of relief moved through the gallery like a sign no one had realized they'd been holding. Afterward, as I stepped outside, the autumn air was cool against my skin. For the first time in years, the weight pressing on my chest was gone. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, but I only gave them one line before walking away. She tried to bury me with lies. But I grew from the soil she left behind. That night, back in my apartment, I lit a single candle. No cameras. No live streams. Just me. And when I looked out the window, watching the first glow of morning rise over the city, I finally understood. Patricia's empire had burned to ashes. But mine, my life, my voice, my truth, was just beginning to bloom.